So, good afternoon. Welcome to the afternoon of day 2 at the MediWales Connects conference online, the NHS collaboration conference for Wales. We've had a day and a half of excellent presentations so far. We've covered a huge amount of ground. Just this morning, we've had a superb session on product development, and we've had a great case study example of a new product that's been developed in the diagnostics field. And then just before lunch, we had a great session from the value-based procurement team, and a really informative Q&A session on the benefits of a value-based approach and how industry can engage with the value-based approach. So very pleased with progress so far. And very happy to welcome you back. We have 2 sessions this afternoon. We have today the Bevan Commission presentation coming up shortly, which is around adopt and spread. So a very topical theme, and one that I know a lot of people are very interested in and involved in. So I'll be welcoming that team to take the reins in a moment. And then at 3 o'clock today, we have some real expertise in terms of regulation. Now, I know regulation might seem like an industry subject, getting products through regulation, whether that be the Medical Device Directive, the Diagnostics Directive, or the Pharmaceuticals Directive. But I would recommend that anybody who has aspirations to get a product through development into the market, whether that be clinician innovators, academic innovators, or industry companies, to come along and participate in that session. And we do have panelists from both from the industry side, those who have been experienced in getting things through regulatory compliance on a number of occasions, and we've got the NHS shared services represented by Pete Phillips, who is involved in ensuring that medical products that are procured by the NHS in Wales are regulatory compliant. So two really interesting sessions this afternoon. So can I just say, as I have at the beginning of each session, please engage with us on Twitter. Our handle is MW Connects, so at MW Connects, and you'll see that there's already a lively conversation going on Twitter, and you can participate, you can comment, and you can raise a bit of profile for your organisation through Twitter. The link is now in the chat as we speak. Another link that we'll have in the chat in a moment is for the programme, so that you can see what we've got coming up later today, tomorrow, and on our final digital day. So you'll see a link to our digital programme coming up in the chat in a moment. So please take time to have a look at that. And also just a comment about Meeting Mojo for everybody who's registered, and presumably you all are, otherwise you wouldn't be here. You will have had a link to your Meeting Mojo profile. So if you can log into Meeting Mojo, put a few words about yourself in the profile, and then you will be able to request one-to-one online meetings with other participants in the conference, and you will also be available for others to request meetings from you. So please do make the most of the facilities available. The other thing where you can engage, and we really do encourage this because it really helps the speakers and it really helps the programme, is if in the chat or the Q&A, and you'll find both in the top right-hand corner of your screen. If you can engage with asking questions, or if you just introduce yourself, give us your web link to your organisation. This is a collaboration conference. There is no shame in giving yourself a shout and making sure that everyone else knows you're in the room. One of the challenges with a digital event is that participants who are viewing the event can go unnoticed. So this is your opportunity through the chat, through the Q&A, to introduce yourselves and make comment, pass comment, or ask questions. Please, we've got a team who are there monitoring the chat, monitoring the Q&A, who are available to answer your questions or pass them forward to the chair of the session. So on that note, I am going to now introduce our next speaker, which is Rupert Chilvers, Bevan Commission Programme Lead for Adopt and Spread innovation. And Rupert is going to introduce the National Adopt and Spread Programme. So Rupert, if you are there, if you're in the room, if you can turn your camera and your microphone on, then we can hand over to you.
Hi, Gwyn. Thank you very much. Can I let
Hey, there's always a nervous moment for me just to get just to get the first speaker up. So it's great to see you, and I'm going to hand over to you now. But I'll be here in the background if you need me.
Thank you. Before you disappear, can you let Joe Brown in as well, please? Absolutely.
So Sam's your tech support for today. So if Sam, if you could promote Joe to speaker, then Joe can participate. That would be great. Okay, so thank you very much, Rupert, and I will leave it to you to introduce yourselves.
Thank you very much. Thank you for going through the Connect programme as well. I've heard wonderful things about what's happening these last few days. Really excited to be here in terms of supporting this event. We have a presentation that we've got for you. But it is interactive. So I do encourage you at this stage to pick up a piece of paper and have it in front of you. We do want this to be your moment to think about adoption and spread as well. We think some of you are innovators in the audience who want to find out what you do for your innovation. So pick up the piece of paper, make sure you have it to hand. And please excuse the noise in the background. We've got garden work going on in our neighbour's garden. So I'm going to share my presentation and hope you can see it. Okay, so you should be able to hear me and see my slides. Is that right, Joe?
Rupert, we can see it, so you can see the next slide, etc. as well.
Okay, let me unshare and make this a one screen, which is the problem we have right now. So guys, the tech will just switch over very shortly. And then we should be able to share before we get going.
Whilst Rupert's doing that, I'll introduce myself. Hi, everybody. My name's Joanna Brown, and I'm a project manager at the Bevan Commission. I've been working on the Adopt and Spread programme. And what my key role has been working with the different innovators across the country, that network engagement piece, and making sure and helping them with as much as I can about the project. So from things like creating a business case to how to do opportunity costings, just to, how to get something on social media, etc. So a whole variety of things. They're working with all the different adoption sites we've had and with the innovators as well. So I think Rupert's managed to sort out her IT.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Joe. And I'm Dr. Rupert Chilvers. I'm Programme Lead for the Adopt and Spread Programme and soon to be Deputy Director for the Bevan Commission. So we have just been spending the last year or so with these programme participants, and we've learnt a lot we want to share with you, but we've also developed a couple of exercises that we think will be of benefit to innovators and leaders who are supporting innovators. So that's what today's session is all about. So just to get us started then, and I carry on with my tech world. In terms of interactive session, you've got a couple of things going on. We will ask you questions. We're hoping we can see the chat and understand who you are and what you're hoping to gain out of this session. And then the interactive session will come a little bit later, called Boxing Up Your Innovation. And for that exercise, we want you to have an example in mind. So if you haven't got one directly related to what you're doing, have a think what it would be in terms of an innovation that you would want to box up and share with the world. Some of you may be familiar with the Bevan Commission, and I'm just going to play you a very short videos shortly, but essentially this programme that we're presenting to you comes from the work of the Bevan Exemplars. The Bevan Exemplars have been working with the Bevan Commission, their health and care professionals all over Wales. This programme's been running for 5 years and has over 200 innovators in the mix. And what happened a couple of years ago is Bevan Commission decided to support the adoption process of some of these exemplars going across Wales. And that's really what happened here. So we're up to 51 right now, but at the start of our project, we had around 45 adoption sites who were supporting the spread of 15 Bevan exemplar projects. So think of it as the equivalent of 1 in 3 maybe. So 1 exemplar project going to 3 adoption sites. It wasn't always as equal as that. It was sometimes just 1 going to an adoption site, and sometimes 5 adoption sites were taking on an innovation. But the idea here and the mindset we want you to think about is the adopter mindset. That's a different mindset to the innovator mindset. So innovation happens, gets tested, sometimes outside of the real setting and sometimes in the setting, but essentially that's innovation. Adoption happens when you take on someone's idea or innovation and start to think, how does this work in my area? And that's what the Adopt and Spread programme was focusing on. So we actually recruited adoption sites, and the exemplars came alongside that recruitment process. We actually released a brochure of more than 15 exemplar projects, around 35, and 15 were successful because adoption sites took them on board. And we'll talk to you a little bit about what happened there. And so if you're an innovator, we're talking about the adoption site that takes you on as an innovator, takes on your innovation. So I want to play a very quick video for you if this technology is going to work. And I'm going to switch off my video just to make sure it doesn't glitch. I hope that gave you a little bit about what we are calling our Adopt and Spread program. So at this point, I just want to take a little moment to think about who we're talking to. Usually in these type of conversations, we end up giving you generic information, and we don't want to do that. So I wonder, and I think you have to do this through Q&A, and I'll invite, I can't remember who our technical support's coming from, but I'll invite them to get involved and help us out. Sam, thank you. So do start typing away. We want to know a little bit about you. So the question is a little bit about yourself. What do you do? And what is your interest in adoption and spread of innovation? Type away, and we'd love to hear from you. And I'm guessing you can do chat as well.
Yeah, I think it needs to go into the chat as opposed to Q&A.
Okay, so go for it. We want to hear from you. Please do type away. So it doesn't matter in terms of where you work. We just want to know what you do and what you're interested in terms of adoption. Is it new to you? Is it really, really old hat? Is there a problem you're trying to solve?
So Rupert, just sorry to interrupt, but just to help things on a little bit, just a bit of a tutorial. In the chat, you'll see that just above where you type, it says send to, and I think the default is panelists. So if you click on that, you get sent to all panelists and attendees. And if you do that, you'll be sharing with the rest of the group instead of just the panelists. So just a top tip, and you'll notice the panelists that can see that I failed to do that earlier. So I'm just learning from my mistakes.
So yes, so do type away. And what we want to understand is, how is the boxing up your innovation going to help you when we start talking about the detail? And what conversation do you want to hear from us about an experience that was held with over 150 participants taking part in a national Adopt and Spread program, one of the largest we are aware of, where data collection and research, live research was taking place? What do you want to know? So we have a few coming through here, thank you. So what advice would you give to industry, and especially companies with new products, to engage with the program? So I'm going to expand that a little bit and talk about not just the program, but a program like this. So it's for some of you new, and some of you're thinking, what does it actually take to identify suitable innovations and make it possible to spread it locally, regionally, and nationally? So I feel like some of your comments, thank you so much for typing away on there. Some of your comments giving me the insight that actually you might be new to this, and you might be thinking about what is this structured program they keep going on about? But really what you're trying to do is get to that end point where your innovation or somebody else's innovation is being spread and benefiting the people that we want to benefit in health and care. So we're going to keep moving forward and talk to you about the Adopt and Spread program first, and then go into a discussion. To give you timelines, the Adopt and Spread program started around the October 2019 mark. I say around, funding came before that, and we started a recruitment process. So think of it as a 2-year program, really. So when we started, we actually looked at selecting adoption sites. So the recruitment process looked something like this. Bevan exemplars were asked if they wanted to be part of an Adopt and Spread program. Some of you being innovators, you would be asked if you want to be part of a program that supported adoption sites. Then adoption sites were asked to give an application in terms of which innovations they wanted to take on and why they wanted to take that on. There was some funding attached to this particular program, but we'll talk to you about whether that was an essential part of it or not. Then they were asked to take part in a 12-month program. We say 12 to 15 months here, clearly COVID hit. So we did extend it. So in theory, we would have finished by now and telling you everybody finished, but we let it go until March. So everybody's finishing with us end of March, but being in the Bevan Commission, you never really finish, you stay with us, and we love to keep in touch. As part of this work, think of it as a delivery of a 12-month support program. I'll tell you what that involved in a minute. But we were developing what we call a conceptual model. And the conceptual model was about trying to understand what we share back to the world after this. So what do we share back to you that makes it possible to answer the type of questions you're talking about? How do we spread innovation faster? How do we actually make it happen and be sustained when it's on location? For this, the options 5, 6, and 7 that you see here is yet to take place. We're going to be running masterclasses at the end of May. If you sign up to our newsletter on our website, you'll get more information about that. It is aimed at the leaders, but as there will be resources and toolkits for innovators, some of you in the room today. The evaluation and sharing of learning is taking place around June, and there's a showcase that's taking place from the end of May to June. If you go to our Eventbrite page, Bevan Commission Eventbrite page, you will find all the showcases that you can sign up to. And we hope that will be an interactive session as well, like this. So in terms of what actually we did in terms of support, this was a cohort-based learning. I want to emphasize that. Cohort-based means there was peer learning. The adopters, even when there was more than one, were in the same room as the exemplar, and we treated them like a project. And then we had all the projects, so up to 15 at the start. It became 13 after various pauses due to COVID. We put an interim report out that explains that part of it. So that is a cohort. We learned a lot from putting adopters in the same room as an exemplar. And remember that exemplars in our case were in the health and care system. So we learned a lot watching that interaction, and we've recorded that and we've analysed that. They were given workshops and training. They were asked to attend a minimum of 6 network days, which became half days though online. We were trying to be agile and fast in making that happen, but they were planned as face-to-face. They were being given coaching, and they were being given basic skill sets that we knew was important for adoption. All of that was based on a conceptual model of what we knew it took from the evidence, what we knew it took for teams and people and organizations to make change happen and sustain change. There was one-to-one elements between myself and Joe and others who came on the program, like Professor Nick Rich, who provided a lot of measurement and evaluation support, and grant was allocated as part of this. So some people received very, very small grants that's almost like seed funding, and some people received bigger grants because actually they couldn't get going without it, and their particular innovation was more expensive than another one.
And there were some people that didn't receive any grants at all.
Exactly. So this is where Joe perfectly timed. Before you go into your own worlds about the innovations you're thinking about and challenges that you're thinking about, we thought we might actually share a little bit of our learning more through a chat. So, Joe, I'm going to ask you the question. We learned a lot. And if we did it again, what would we want innovators and exemplars to come equipped with?
So the innovators, so I'm presuming that is most of you guys, the thing that you need to come equipped with, first of all, is your time. So it's, do you have time to get this out to everybody? Have you got that time? And have you got that drive and that ambition to do that? Because if you haven't got that, and we did have innovators who didn't have that, it does make it very hard, particularly for the adoption sites, because they're going to lean on you and you're going to be a mentor to them. So you need to think about, you know, have you got the time? Have you got those mentoring skills? And one of the things that I would put into this program now, if it was, you know, to be run again, I would put all the exemplars would have a mentoring course, just a couple of hours workshop, just so they understand what mentoring means and how to transfer that knowledge. But the
Can I stop you there, Jo? What do you actually mean by mentoring, and why was it important?
It's so the people that you're going to need coaching, they need help, they need support, and it's going to be on little things. So it's a lot of clinicians, because it's mainly clinicians we've worked with, don't necessarily have people that work for them, so they're not used to being in that position. They're not used to that role of encouraging someone, of being someone's mentor, of leading by example. They're used to a role of, this is what I do. I've made it better. This is what I do. Now you do it, which is great that they have made something better. You know, they've come up with an innovation, but they need to find a way of transferring that skill. And that needs to be done via sort of like some sort of mentoring. And some of the guys we've had have been amazing mentors without any, you know, support. So some of them have been absolutely fantastic. Others have struggled slightly more with that. So that, which then leads me on to something else that I think we probably need to look at, is to be aware that adoption sites will adapt what you've done, and you to understand that adoption sites will adapt what you've done. So you could have come up with an innovation that you've rolled out to one site, it works perfectly well on that site, but where you're taking it to next, you might want to do it slightly differently. They might want to do it in a different way. They may want to use your technology differently. They may tweak the processes so it suits them better. And as an innovator, you need to not take that personally, which some people have. They've gone, no, they're not doing what I've done. I'm not, you know, and taking that step back. You've got to, you know, embrace that next step, that next innovation, because it could help you. It could help other sites. It could be something that they've tried and doesn't work, but again, it's a learn for next time. So you need to embrace the fact that each site will do something very slightly differently, because they within most places the processes aren't exactly the same. So things are going to need to be tweaked. They're going to need to be adapted, and that could be something really little, or it could be something more fundamental. So one example I can give you for this is something that was tweaked, and it goes to COVID really, is that they were going to give it, you know, they've moved the training to online, so they can give the training online, and it was smaller groups that they were going into different surgeries, etc., to deliver the training. Now that's gone online, and it's gone wider because of it, because they haven't had to limit it to just where they are in that physical location. So they have adapted it for that purpose. Another way it's been adapted is, rather than having a one-on-one consultation in a project, they are now doing group-based consultations via things like Teams. So people will adapt your project slightly, so just for you to be aware of that and to embrace that change as well.
So what support do you think we gave them, or organisations gave them, while they were adapting?
A lot of hand-holding is the one I want to say is true, particularly because a lot of the adaptation that we faced was because of COVID, and I will admit was because of COVID. So it was a lot of moving online. It was, how do we still manage to deliver this, but under COVID, has things changed? So you know, are you not able to see patients face to face anymore? Are you now doing your consultations over things like Teams, or I can't remember what the doctor's one's called, Meet Anywhere?
Attend Anywhere.
That's it, Attend Anywhere. My mind suddenly went blank, what it was called. Or is it a case of, you know, you need more PPE, which means the consultation takes longer? Are they getting referred to you by different routes at the moment? So a lot of the thing has been hand-holding, so particularly that digital stuff. So a lot of the people we've worked with have never had to do anything digital, so we've had to hand-hold with that. We've also been lucky to have Nick in the place of being able to help us with the, okay, how's that going to affect our measurements? So that's Professor Nick Rich. He's been able to support in that respect and helping with that process mapping. So you'll probably need help, I would have said, with process mapping, because it is looking at what the process is at the moment and what that process will be. So it is that the swim lane process mapping that you would probably need help and support with. Something that we've done with the exemplars, which I would recommend that you all do, is something called an A3 document, which, Rupert, do you want to describe it?
Yeah, so really, we obviously have tons of ways in which we can talk about what our business model is and what it takes, what the benefits are and what the resources are, etc. You can go very heavy-handed and you can have a thick, manual out there. This is an A3 chart equivalent. So the idea is that on an A3 piece of paper with some given boxes, which is part of the toolkits we'll be releasing, you can actually summarize what the current situation is, what the future state will be, and then talk about the benefits and be able to take that along with you in a confident way to know that you have some sort of a plan. And I think, Joe, that relates to the fact that so much changed.
Yeah.
But actually some people, I remember a quote from one of the participants saying, I had a beautiful plan and now COVID's arrived. But actually the reality is I think most of you who deal with innovation is that a beautiful plan does fall apart very quickly anyway in innovation and adoption world. So yeah, so an A3 chart is the equivalent of a short way of presenting what you would in terms of business model, approach, benefits, those kind of statements.
And the adoption sites do need to be able to see that before they're willing to take on something. So if you haven't got that, this is what our current process is, this is what our new process is, this is what it took for us to do it, these are what the benefits are, these are what the results are, etc. No one's going to take it on in the first place. So you need to have that clearly done for anyone to take on any type of innovation. As much as it's going to work, you need to have a way of showing them. Which leads on to something else that we did was a session with innovators called Boxing Up Your Innovation. So that's a way of packaging it as well for things like adoption sites and going out further. Do you want me to?
We're going to cover that a little bit later, so we're going to get you to do the exercise. So I'm going to ask you, Joe, in terms of, I guess, industry partners. So there is a lot of interest here in terms of industry partners. Mm-hmm. How would you say it played out in the Adopt and Spread program?
It played out fine. So it was a lot of them getting to know people. So personal networks is something that I've noticed since I've been in the Bevan Commission has affected things a lot in this area. So once community partners have got introduced to a couple of people, then on things like Network Day, they've met other people. The adoption sites themselves have become advocates for them and spread that word. So it is those industry partners have been helped by the adoption sites in themselves for spreading that word, for getting the knowledge of that particular product or innovation out there. In one of the cases, within Adopt and Spread, we had a meeting which within the Bevan Commission, which was about something completely different. And one of the guys said, I'm doing this with an industry partner, and we got someone else calling up the hand and go, can I do that too, please? So be aware that personal networks of your adoption sites, in terms of industry partners, are really important, and that will be a really integral way of you getting your innovation out there further.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Joe. So I'm going to pick up from that point really to the next part. Looking at your comments, there is a right mix of audience here, but there is this really interest on if there's an innovation, if there's an idea, if there's a clinically proven clinical trials have been run and you've got that firm evidence that this needs to go forward, then what do you do with it? And I think thanks so much for that conversation, Joe, because I think what it should be telling you is that this is not easy. This is not something you hand over and you walk away in the way that we ran this program. But what we did do, and what Joe's alluding to, is try to understand how much you can hand over and walk away. And that's the boxing up your innovation concept. But it is really important when you think about adoption, and we do have more coming at the end of May with the masterclass that tells you the detail and the science behind what we're talking about. When you think about adoption, someone's making a decision to bring it into their team, their organization, or just to their own practice. And very often the ones we dealt with was to a team. You never do innovation adoption alone, really, in health and care. If it is, you're training yourself up, you're doing CPD, and then you're doing something different. This type of innovation is a team-based effort. So we invited teams into our program. When I talk about over 100 people participating in the program, I'm talking about teams coming into the program. So if nothing else, think of the words adoption and adaptation, adaption, whichever way you look at it. This is not a hand it over and run away concept. You might be able to, as a industry partner, do that, but you need to make sure that there's an exemplar equivalent around somewhere along the lines. So I'm going to, I guess, show you in a very kind of loose diagram here what we're talking about. So you have the concept of time, and this is where the rapid part comes in. Time matters, big time. It matters. So from that point of view, you know, what I will say is those people who went really fast as soon as they knew they were in the Adopt and Spread program, well, they were live before COVID hit. We started in January. There were people, they had them trained. It went all over. This was in North Wales. Their entire team was ready to adopt, even though they hit that issue about, you know, not being able to see the patients that they wanted to see in order to put their innovation into place. You'll notice that I talk without actual names, and that's because we want to keep some of our learning anonymous, and so that we can share its more sensitive parts of what didn't work as well. So time really matters here, and how fast you can go with time as an innovator and as an adopter really matters. So you have a concept idea, you're testing in the real world. So even if you're doing a clinical trial, that is not testing in the real world. What we're about to talk to you about is the information you need once you hit the real world. So once you hit the setting, whether it's clinical or practitioner world, once you hit that setting, what is it that they need to adopt? That's the detail you're talking about. We're not worrying about whether your clinical trial showed a lot of improvement versus something else. We are worrying about that, just tick it off, to call it an innovation that's ready for adoption, to help make the decision that adoption needs to take place. But that is not where it really starts. It starts with that decision, and that decision is shaped by a number of different factors, including the evidence, but also the opportunity to make change happen in that setting and discover the benefits. Because just because it worked in one place doesn't mean it works in another place, and we all know that. And that's for various reasons. So this concept of the first few adoption sites, we can talk about what it takes to get the first few adoption sites, but here I just want you to understand the concept of the first few adoption sites. The first few adoption sites in our program came because a brochure was released, and we actively engaged the organizations and teams to get involved. But it also came because the exemplar had a network, like Joe said. And they also started knocking on doors and said, we have an opportunity here. And any program, and I've seen this, I used to be a commercial director with the Academic Health Science Networks, and I've seen that work there as well. This idea that you're in a time-limited moment really actually makes a difference. In our program, they were in a cohort, they were recruited, they were given a program to participate in. That is a really interesting concept that you can take forward as a leader, because it ticks a lot of boxes, including giving permission. It gives people permission to do things that they might otherwise be wary about doing or less confident. When you have a first few adoption sites, they give each other permission. They give each other confidence. And that was an interesting part of this. You might hear about digital health accelerator programs or other programs all over UK. That is a cohort concept, but sometimes they focus in on innovators coming together. What we did is focus in on adopters coming together, and the innovators were invited in. And that is a flip. And some companies have user groups, user panels, those kind of things. They matter for these people learning from each other, especially in healthcare. And as Joe mentioned, actually the first few adoption sites might adapt what you did. And you've got to understand where that adaptation is possible. And I don't mean the point where they say, can you change the app so that it does something different? I'm not talking about technological or technical changes to the innovation characteristic. I'm talking about them adapting the bits they are in control of. So they are taking the cost and the hit of making those adaptations. And that is really important, because actually on a couple of our programs where the exemplar could sit back a little bit and let that happen, they are going wild. They're going wild in terms of the possibility that the exemplar and innovator never thought of at the beginning. And because of the context changing, yes, COVID, but because it's landing in new areas and they're thinking up new different ways, and they're going, well, you know how you did it here? It doesn't work for us. We won't be able to carry it on. I'm either going to need to take something I know will fail, or I'm going to change it. And that change process needs to be supported. Ultimately, the idea here is that we need to keep going back to the people we're trying to support. Whether it's for today or whether it's for tomorrow, it is about the people in health and care who are going to benefit. And the professionals and the staff who are taking on these innovations are focused on that. They're passionate about that and they want to make that happen. So if you're seeing benefit, even more benefit from the first time you saw benefit in the real world, as we talked about, that we're talking about in terms of measurement. We're not talking about it in terms of evidence generation for you to prove that actually this innovation still keeps on working. We're not talking about that in our program. In our program, we're talking about the measurement that will take this to be a sustainable innovation. And that sustainable part is going to be contextual. For one innovation, they have to have a massive business case to keep going. So the measurement they have to have in place has to prove hundreds and thousands of pounds of savings. And that is a very different task to another one where they have actually introduced it in such a way that they can sustain it with literally pennies and pounds. So it's going to be different based on who you're looking at in terms of what benefit looks like. But think about measurement as opposed to evidence for impact. And what we're saying and what we have seen is that what you see as the first few adoption sites during the program, so what we've done is during the program, we actually introduced the opportunity for new adoption sites to come in. So new adoption sites were able to come in, but new exemplars, new innovations couldn't come in. And we made that cycle a 48-hour cycle. So what we said is, if you as an adopter or exemplar understands that somebody wants to take it on, then we have a certain criteria they have to hit. They fill in a short form and they're in, because a due diligence has happened. So what does it take to speed up your burst, your next set of adoption sites? It's the speed at which you can bring them into a supportive program. So I'm hoping that I haven't gone too fast on that, but actually this is very much about time as well as support. So let's not talk about this as a handover and run. There is a lot you can do to do that. But let's talk about this as, and they're not pilot sites, they're not trial sites, they're not trying to prove the point for your part of evidence generation that you need to do to make a business case. They are adopting what you're doing. And that's the important distinction you have to have in your head if you're in industry or an innovator. So, Joe, I'll bring you in again. We'll have a very short discussion here. So there are a few people here who want to understand what it takes to get an adoption site. And what I'm going to do is flip that question. If you had an adoption site, if you had your first few adoption sites, what would you do to make the most of it? So, Joe, open question to you. How do you make the most of your first few adoption sites?
The first few adoption sites, I suppose, what the main thing you make the most of is the feedback you get from them. So it's what works for them, what doesn't work for them. Do you want to tweak the overall model? It's getting that feedback of actually it's taken more time than I thought it would to support these adoption sites. How can I support them in less time going forward? So it's a combination of okay, what can they give me about the innovation itself, but it's also that what level of support is required to make this go further. How can I make that as streamlined as possible? How can I make that as efficient as possible? But also, how can I make that as effective as possible? So there's two ways of looking at it. It's the innovation itself and what feedback they can give you regarding the innovation, and is it adapted? How's it been adapted? What difference has that made to the overall benefits? As I said, the other side of that is how much support do you need to give them? And is it as much as you thought? Is it less than you thought? And how can you make that as suitable and tailored as possible if required?
And I would add to that, Joe, thank you for that. I would add that when we're talking about bringing on your adoption site, we're not talking about the testing phase. So if you're still in testing phase, you don't have an adoption site, you have a testing site, but they can be your exemplar. So some of the questions you're talking about asking here is how does it get in? Well, you need to find an exemplar. You need to find a user in the system who is going to test some of these out for you before it goes to the first few adoption sites. So I guess in terms of what you've talked about, that being able to do the support, Joe, in a sort of supportive way. You talked about coaching and mentoring before, but also with a feedback loop that you're responding to is really important.
Yeah, you need to get 360 feedback from everyone.
Yeah, and having lots of adoption sites in one room definitely gives you that, doesn't it?
The other thing the adoption sites will give you is, if you do want this big burst, is that network as well. So we've got one project at the moment who has gone out to initially 5 adoption sites. That's gone up to 8 adoption sites within the programme, but they're now doing a big burst, hopefully getting out to another 12 adoption sites, and that has been through networks. So networks is really, really important thing to make sure that you don't forget about, that these adoption sites network is really important. So yes, they're going to be your advocates. They're going to be your unpaid salespeople. That's what they will become.
Yeah. And that's because they believe that there is a difference that's going to be made for the people that we're trying to care for, and that's what's driving them. So we do have examples of projects where there are exemplars working with industry, but the exemplars are leading the way, not the industry partner. So your conversation is, how do you look after them in such a way that they can really get to grips with what benefits you're making to that system? I know I'm oversimplifying it, and it's things you've already tried before, but it is constantly thinking, how do I look after them? So anything to add, Joe, before I move on?
No problem.
Perfect. So for some of you, there are questions there in terms of how we as Bevan Commission can help and new cycles. I will just look through your questions while you're doing this exercise, and Joe and I can have a little back and forth answering them. So we want to take you into a sort of mind shift. So you've heard a little bit about adoption, adaptation, and growth. But you are innovators and innovating, most of you. So this exercise is meant for you. What we have devised as part of the Adopt and Spread programme is the Boxing Up Your Innovation exercise, which was based on a gap that we saw. The gap that we saw was that when an adoption site received news that they could be an adoption site, we had a lot of variation in terms of how they could get started. Some were very quick and they said, actually, this is what you need to do, and I'm here to help you, and we've done it. Now, you could say that's simpler, and for simple innovations that work, you literally find out in half a day, literally with a discussion, exactly what needs to be done. The team and the professionals or the people in the health and care sector know exactly what to do with your innovation, and they walk away. But most of what we talk about here, and the reason we talk about 17-year gap between innovation and adoption, is because of complexity. So the Boxing Up Your Innovation exercise is trying to tackle a little bit about the complexity side of handing over your innovation. So what we found is that there were some myths that were circulating in the way that when we worked with exemplars and adoption sites, we had to address. So some of them said, I've got a PowerPoint presentation and that is my box. That is my innovation ready to go. I've given it to someone in that team, in that location, and they're going to fly with it. Or I wrote this business case over here, and when I hand it over to the next clinician or practitioner, they're going to be able to do whatever they like with it. And I've given them all the detail I need to give them. Or actually, I don't need to hand over anything. It won't make a difference. They just need to work it out for themselves. I'll just give them that. The other one, which I know works really well in the health and care sector because of these networks, but it's so hard to make happen for the burst. It was actually really hard to make happen once you were beyond 1 or 2 adoption sites, was I'll just keep talking to them. I'll tell them exactly what they need to know. They'll ask me questions and I'll answer it, and it'll be easy. They'll pick it up and it will just happen. Well, they are myths for us because that didn't work that way. There was a handful that worked that way, but most didn't work that way. And a lot of the conversations that we recorded and analysed at the start of the programme made it very clear that this didn't work that way. And we have examples of that back and forth. How do I do this? Well, what about this? What about this little bit of detail that I need? What about when a patient comes to a different location to what you're talking about? All those bits of detail is what holds us up. And in my mind, I use an example to do with hand washing. So it's not that we didn't know how to do hand washing. It's not that we didn't know we had to keep our hands clean. But we had to work through every part of the detail. We had to work out whether the sleeves were causing a problem and take it back and put guidelines in place to do that. We had to work out where to put the tap, how to turn the tap on so that we weren't passing on infections. We had to work out the detail. When it comes to innovation, that is really what you're handing over. You're not handing over the box that has a gadget in it. You're handing over the approach and how exactly they are going to make this work. And that's what we think in terms of success. So we said, think about it like a box. Literally, what is that box you're going to hand over? When you think of a box, you start to think, and this applies to everybody. This isn't, I haven't got a gadget, I haven't got a box. Everybody's got a box. So the decision you're trying to think through is, what does my box look like? How big should it be? And what should be on it? When you go to a shelf, you pick up a box because it says something to you there and then. So what is this innovation box going to be for the health and care practitioner, for the manager, for the team, for the individual who's going to see that box and go, do I use it here? So I would invite you to do this exercise and pretend on innovation if you or think of one that you've come across if you haven't got one yourself. What I'm inviting you to do is understand what your box top looks like. What does it look like when you just tell me what you are and what you do? And being a box, you can't do a lot of words. You have to think about the number of words you're doing. So this is one of our programs, and she had to think about what is she actually offering. So when we translated that to our transformational change program that we apply to organizations and teams and leaders, we had a title, the Transformational Change Program. That's exactly what we wanted it to say. But it's an adaptable program. We adapt it to your organization. It's an adaptable program. We support and guide you as you look to achieve transformational change. So the question for you is, what's in the box as well? But I don't want you to think about that yet. I want you to think about what goes in front of the box. So it looks something like this. So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to just, and it is about writing it. So just write down your title and your statement. What is in the front of your box? And I'll leave this one there. And please do type away in the chat. So we'll monitor chat, but take 5 minutes. Some of you have really fascinating titles, so please do write the statement line that goes alongside that. And we'd love to see it in the chat box. Give you another minute or two. Okay, I'm hoping a few of you have a statement as well as a title. And I think there is an option here where you can come and have a conversation with us. So if you want to have a conversation with us, just signal us on the chat and we can actually bring you in for a conversation. We'd love to talk this through with you. So it is really important. And the other lesson, and I would say this comes from possibly the kind of general support that I've seen go out to industry as well as health and care professionals. We can't aim our innovation to everybody, even if it feels relevant to everybody, because most people switch off with that. They can't quite get their head around what relevance it has for their own context. And context is so important here in terms of where I sit, where I work, whether I think your innovation can slot in. And that's the adaptation conversation we've talked about. And that is influencing the decision to adopt. So if you aim it very generally, someone will walk away going, I don't know how to make that work. If you can tagline it, if you can put a statement that makes it relevant to me, you want me to pick it off the shelf, you're talking to me, then that is a different conversation. So there's some good stuff going on here. So I would just encourage you, if you do want to come in and have this back and forth conversation, to let us know. But I think we have a couple of like long statements and we have a short statement. So I'm just going to pick CanSense. Thanks, Dean, for that. A tool to identify colorectal cancer in adults with bowel symptoms. Now, I think I can see that that's not for me, but someone who works with adults who want to pick this up and works in oncology and in terms of diagnostics, by the sounds of it, would go, that's relevant to me. And there's a lot more here. I'm talking to you about an exercise we would normally run about over 3 hours, and we will have them on offer from June. But in terms of what we're doing here, we're just trying to make you think, who is your audience and what are you trying to tell them? So thank you very much for participating in that. I will just do one other exercise, and this is the part that is very much about the adaptation part of it. So we sometimes talk about this description. I think if you run clinical trials or you're part of research studies, it's listed as an implementation plan. There are various tools you can use to list exactly what you need to do. You need a research nurse present to give the injection so that your innovation works. All those details are written in. But sometimes we do that as a person-to-person conversation in innovation. And the idea of the box, what's in the box, is to say exactly what they're getting and what they're not getting. So you're not going to get the nurse who needs to do that injection in the box, but you're possibly going to get the drug that they need to get over there. And then there's a whole host of other things people need. And there's the other things people need that hold it up. And because not all innovations are gadgets, we do need to think about this differently. So I'm just going to show you one example that we worked with. In this innovation, there is training being handed over for a particular type of practice that will prevent speech and language, issues developing in later life for children because you have intervened in the early years. But actually, if you just said to me, and this is Be Here, Be Clear, I can be specific about that one. If you just said to me, it's Be Here, Be Clear, it's a training that you need to go to, and that sorts you out, you'd be wrong. Because it's more complex than that for that professional, and it's more complex than that when you're actually trying to adapt, and implement it. So this is the list of what that particular exemplar was going to give in the box. This is what they're getting as part of the training. This is what they're getting as part of being part of the Adopt and Spread programme, and it's being handed over to them, literally. What they're not getting is also made quite obvious. So I'll take you to IKEA world for now, but some of you might recognise this as what you write on a business case, but actually you don't present it in a business case because the decision to adopt has been made. So the business case has come and gone, someone shelved it. So this is the box that sits after you've made that decision. So if you think about a food box that's arriving, what is it in there? Is it going to give me my pots and pans? If it's a wardrobe that's arriving, are you going to give me the screwdrivers? So these are the kind of decisions or kind of information that people need as they're making their decision about the resources they need to make available. So for somebody else who's got their innovation, they were talking about the physical space that needs to be made available in order for this to happen. So one of the innovations I was involved in a year or two ago was to do with introduction of a drug. And that introduction of the drug, it wasn't about whether the drug can be given or not. The decision about when to switch that particular patient to that drug safely, to that new drug safely. So the guidelines were there, the NICE guidelines were there. It was a better, it was going to save lots of money, and you didn't need to come into the hospital to have the drug. And you as a patient would actually be able to manage a lot more back at home. But that is not what was stopping that innovation being adopted. What was stopping that innovation being adopted is the logistics of getting that patient in. When exactly can you do it? The criteria sheet that said you had to exclude XYZ person because of certain symptoms. That's what a practitioner is trying to work through. That's what stops innovation being adopted and makes it harder for it to be adopted. So I'm not going to ask you to do this exercise because we're running out of time, but I am going to ask you to seriously think about, and you can just do that through the chat box. And if you do want to have a conversation in this session, we probably have about 5 minutes that we can have a back and forth. But we do this in the workshop. We make people actually go through all of this and talk about what's in the box. So physical things, a service, you just put it on a card and put it in so that someone actually knows. Once you've done all those things, you will start to understand what exactly it takes to do the adoption. But actually what you will start to understand is what exactly you need as an innovator and exemplar to hand over your innovation. So that guideline, for example, is that part of the box? Are you actually saying that there is a process already out there that's been signed off by a sort of a body that's responsible for regulating our healthcare? Are you putting that in the box? So all those conversations in Adopt and Spread program, we had health and care professionals who were doing this. So they were already signing off a lot of the legalities of what it takes to make the change happen. If you're an innovator in industry, how are you managing that process? How are you supporting that process? That's really important to put in the box or make clear it's not in the box and it's outside the box. So I'm going to just sort of stop there really and say usually what happens in our workshops and also usually what happens when, and there's a lot more of this exercise, so I haven't gone through the sides of the box and what you actually need to do there. So I'm going to pause there and say, you know, we revisit. So your box does change. You're really only prototyping your box at the start, and it does move around. And it is important to think about what that means to the person you're going to give the box to. So revisiting the front of the box, the sides of the box, all of that is actually really important. So you developed your innovation, your industry, so you know exactly how to jazzify this, you know exactly how to put it into the best package it's ever going to be for a gadget. But actually, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about those extra bits that are going to go in the box. I'm talking about your adopter looking for that extra bit of detail that means that they can work out how it sits in their own setting. So I'm going to, I guess we've said a lot. We're here to help you. and I'm going to take us to the questions just to help finish up. So I think, Joe, you're going to be able to see the chat box.
Yes, I can see the chat box.
Yeah, perfect. So we will kind of try and work through question by question, but the first one is, what advice would you give industry and especially companies with new products to engage with the program? So we said don't engage with the program, engage with the adoption sites. How early should they do it, do you think, Joe? I have some thoughts, but I'm going to ask you first.
I would say you need to get your ducks in a row first. You don't want to go out to them too soon for them to lose interest. So you need to make sure that you have your results, you have your benefits, what those processes changes are, etc., before you go out to the adoption sites. It doesn't need to be slick. It doesn't need to, you know, be all singing, all dancing, but you need to have that information.
And the word mature is used, and you'll see it used more and more. Mature innovation is beyond testing phase. It works in context, and your adoption sites know. So that's a tick, done. And then the detail that you put in the box, the detail that you're giving over as part of adoption, means that you know how it works in context. They might tailor it, adapt it, but you know the basics. So don't start too early, but definitely make sure you get an exemplar equivalent. I can't overemphasize that. And when you do, look after them. And when you get your adoption sites, look after them. You're going to put resources into looking after them, basically. So I know we've got investors in the room, or investor. So I'm going to say this to the investor. I think what I've seen with investment panels, venture capitalists, etc., is either you specialize in health and care, or you run away from health and care. And the number of innovators who say they didn't get it, they didn't get how NHS funds me, or they didn't get how I get there, or social care funds me. I think if you're an investor, you're looking for a couple of things. You're looking for, is this simple? And simplicity comes from a number of different ways, and we can go into that in the masterclass, but is this simple? And if it is, someone will get it, and it'll be off the shelf-ish type of approach. If it's not, that doesn't make it a bad investment. What you want to test is, do they know what's in the box? Do they know what's outside the box? And is that innovator connected enough into the health and care system in order to make that happen? And there are different ways you can connect. You can obviously hire people into your company, but you can also make it really, really valuable innovation for someone to take on. And the type of work we've done, we've had industry partners work with exemplars, and the exemplars are taking it forward, not the industry partner. So you're looking for a few signals that says, actually, these guys know what they're talking about and they know the detail. And that's what you're testing, rather than running away from investing in health and care. It's not easy. And we're not saying this is, opening up millions and millions of pounds of doors here, but we are saying it makes a difference to people's lives. So I'll keep moving on to other questions. In terms of one of the questions that was to do with, are we running another cohort and how would Bevan Commission help? What would you say, Joe?
Well, we are, as far as I'm aware, we are running another cohort. And how Bevan Commission helps is obviously giving you tools like the session Rupert's just shown you, but also that connection to a larger network. So again, it was in a physical room, but with the exemplars, we've got them in a physical room with industry partners, with other exemplars, with guest speakers, etc. And we give that time and that help and that support for the exemplar program. So next one I'm going for won't be available till later this year, but that will be there later this year.
Yeah, so cohort 7 is going to be announced in the next few weeks. I would say 5 to 6 weeks, but would start, as Joe said, later in the year. So essentially the recruitment process looks something like this. If you're in industry, want to identify the person within health and care organisations who is already using or thinking about using your innovation. They are the people who apply for the programme. This is the Bevan Exemplar programme. When they apply for the Bevan Exemplar programme, they have the permission and the blessing of their organisation. That is really important to us. It doesn't work without that. And then they're going to take part in a 9 to 12 month programme. They don't have to take that long to actually do the work, but we've just run a 6-month programme, and that testing and measurement and making sure it can be adapted to your space. All those conversations are really hard to make happen when you're brand new to something. It's obviously different when I'm talking about adopt and spread, because there's already someone who's done something like that. So really be ready to be part of a program for that long. And the measurement there is really trying to say, and it did make a difference. So the exemplar world is trying to say it made a difference. It's measuring for a reason. So yes, another one of those. Adopt and spread has a different conversation going on. We are very happy to talk to companies and organizations who want to work with us on how adoption and spread can be taken forward in their organization or for their innovation. And that will be a bespoke offer, as it were. So you're welcome to get in touch with us. It's in terms of contact details, you go to our website, you'll get a form, you can fill it in there, or you can actually email Bevan Commission at swansea.ac.uk, and I'll just type that in the box for you. So the idea here is that we're not looking to run a cohort like we did for the 2 years. That was a specially funded learning cohort. We're not looking to do that, but we are looking to support organizations and innovators who want to take this forward. So it will be on a case-by-case basis, and it is very much about thinking through what you're trying to achieve. We can form partnerships, and we can work with collaboratives as well. And at this point, if you are in the health and care sector, I would also encourage you to think about the clinical networks that might be needing support. And we would be happy to talk to you about how that worked. And how we felt that was really important. So that's kind of our take in terms of how we want to work with you. What we shared to you today is a glimpse of I guess some of the ways in which we work with individuals and support for workshop, but also to give you insight on what's coming as more detail for our masterclass. So if you want to find out more about our masterclass, please do subscribe to our newsletter, and we'll make sure that it's sent to you. So for those of you who are interested in working with us, please do just email us and let us know what we can do to help, and we'll happily respond. And at this point, I will say, if you have any questions, we've just got 5 minutes. I won't take you to the wire, but if you have any questions, please type away. But otherwise, thank you so much for listening, and I hope that it has given you some of the insights for adoption and spread of your innovation. Anything you want to add there, Jo?
No, I put the email address in the text box for you.
Perfect, there you go. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to hand over to Gwyn, I think, at this stage.
Thank you, Rupa. Thank you, Jo, for a really interesting insight, really, into your world, and an insight into disruptive innovation in a complex system. I think I might have subtitled your presentation because I think a lot of the techniques and processes that you are using there to such good effect are really to do with the fact that it's not as simple as people think to do something that's going to create change. Whether that's change in product adoption or service delivery, or usually a combination of both. Yes, the idea of changing a system and then using the box as a metaphor for that is really compelling. And for myself, I mean, I've worked in health and care innovation for it's quite a while now, and one of the challenges that I find when healthcare professionals are the source or the champion of the innovation is that they've got day jobs. So whereas our industry partners quite often also have day jobs, but they are more aligned to, so if they're in product development in their organization, or if they're in sales in their organization, then their day job might well be very closely aligned to their adoption and spreading aspirations as well. Whereas your clinical professionals and healthcare professionals have got other stuff to do, and so I imagine that being able to put stuff in a box and keep track of it and have a very clear label on it and be able to open the box and put all the other stuff in and control it in that way is probably something that they really appreciate as a metaphor for the work. So I don't know whether that's something you'd agree with or whether I've just made it up. I'll let you comment on that in a moment if you like. But the other thing I just wanted to ask, using my prerogative to be able to hack in here and get and ask my question first, is so from the outside we see the Adopt and Spread program alongside the exemplars. We see it alongside the Health Hack. There's other organizations, there's Arch, there's Accelerate, there's Agor IP, and I didn't mean to mention most of the ones that come out of Swansea University, but there are other universities do exist. If for those of you who are listening from Cardiff or the north, but just as examples, and then you know we see a steady flow of these projects end up on our table when it comes to the MediWales Awards, and there is a fair proportion of exemplars that end up winning MediWales Awards. So we're all part of a sort of innovation system in ourselves, and I was just wondering whether you could pass comment on how you see projects flow through your hands, and maybe they're initiated through your projects, or maybe they've come from another project and they end up on your desk. But do you feel that you are part of a wider system? That's the question.
Yes, shall I take that first, Joe? Okay, so yes, everything I've talked to you about today and everything Bevan Commission talks to you about is networked and collaborative. We're hosted by Swansea University. We work across Wales. We, Bangor University colleagues have contributed to our programme in the Adopt and Spread part of it, and Cardiff has as well. So, we have lots of, and we have hooks into Howell Dar and all the universities that are associated there, and everybody you mentioned. So I would say that our first port of call would always be a collaborative project. It would always be national, where we can obviously focus on national. Sometimes we can't, and you chunk it up. But in terms of all the other guys, I think that what I want to say, and this is a Bevan exemplar and Adopt and Spread statement specifically, what I want to say is that our cohort approach and our focus on health and care professionals is the unique part that we look to bring. So without them, none of the success we're talking about could happen. And you mentioned this sort of time element, and I've just been flabbergasted. And I think, our hearts sank in March 2020 when COVID hit, because we had a whole year's plan ready to go, which was face-to-face. We knew how to look after them. We'd done it before and we were ready to go. And we had to flip all of that, and we thought we're going to lose everybody. In our interim report, we have tried to tell you the flips we went through, and we call it pause and unpausing. So there's a concept here, and these busy professionals, regardless of COVID, as you talk about, will hit this. They will hit a moment that their staff they've lost a member of staff that they really need for this project, or their time has gone, they've been redeployed in COVID terms, but that happens in other worlds too. So how do you unpause? That's part of what we're going to do in Masterclass. How do you unpause a busy clinician or practitioner's world to come back in? And that's where that cohort program approach. So I would say, because we were given the opportunity to do this in a learning set, we have done some of the cycles and tested different mechanisms. So that's the first thing to say in terms of difference, and that approach in terms of directly landing in health and care is the difference, I would say, with this massive approach of 50, sometimes 40 exemplars, sometimes 50 adoption sites. You know, they're large scale. We're not talking about, there's a national program in England called NIA, and they look after about 12 to 15 innovators. You know, so that's you know, we're looking after 13 to 15 innovators exemplars with 51 adoption sites. We're doing things slightly differently, not to say that's the wrong thing, but it's a different model. So I think that's the important thing to remember as an innovator industry. Everybody has a different role in the ecosystem, and we're going to do things slightly differently, and you just got to work out which one you want to best be part of and give time to. The worst I've seen is giving time to everybody, and that kills your business, let alone anything else at time. So that's the danger sign I just put up there. Don't give your time to every program out there. Choose a couple.
Yes, that's not to say you can't do one or two, because there are some people we have worked with, Accelerate, we've worked with Ignite, etc., the Health Hack, and some people we've worked, you know, and had conference calls with us, them, and the innovators themselves. So it's finding where you sit in amongst these things.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with that more. Yes, you'll find the niche that's right for you. You'll find the people, you'll find the personalities, the individuals that work well with you and your project, and you'll find the process that works well. So it's not always a linear thing. Sometimes it's a case of square pegs into square holes, or round pegs into round holes. So no, that's really great. So I guess it falls upon me. You said you didn't want to take everyone to the wire, so I've ruined that for you. We've got 30 minutes until we come back for our regulatory session at 3 o'clock, which is another really good session that I do recommend everybody makes a bit of time to attend. And as I already said at the beginning of this session, it's not entirely an industry activity. We do have Chris Hopkins from Haldar, and we have Pete Phillips from Surgical Materials Testing Laboratory on that call as well. So it's going to be a real academic, business and clinical approach and look at regulation. Those of you who are working with your Adopt and Spread projects, your exemplars and your Health Hack projects, you are going to hit regulation one way or another, or you're going to hit regulation, or regulation's going to hit you. So I would suggest that you go and get a cup of coffee, just take a look at the sunshine for a few minutes, because it's beautiful out there. And I'll see you back here at 3 o'clock. Rupert, Joe, thank you so much. That was a really, really interesting session, and I really look forward to working with you more in the future. So thank you. Thanks to everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.